Hello everybody, it's Doc Eon coming to you with another Miniatures Ramble for Monday the 28th of August 2017. And I have actually finished some stuff in the past week. And first up we have here everybody's favorite twin couple, Cersei and Jaime Lannister. And oh, I realized the lighting here is a little weird. The light is coming through the window behind me and it's throwing a lot of shadows. But you can perhaps tell that I've tried, as per the instructions or tips on that DVD set, I painted Cersei with kind of a translucent effect on some of the cloth. And it came out okay. It's, as I mentioned, it's a different technique from the one I've tried before. The one I used before is painting the skin first and then glazing the cloth color on top of that. This is the opposite. This is putting in the skin glaze after painting the dress. And it was tricky. It took a lot of back and forth to get it to work. But then again, so does the other method at times. So, I mean, you need to be able to do both in any case. You need to be able to go in both directions to correct mistakes and fix things. And generally speaking, I think she turned out fine. Then we have Jaime here. I painted him all white as Kingsguard. I should perhaps have gone with a slightly bluer white for the cloak. It's a bit flat gray. Then I did the pearlescent white armor, and I painted his sword a metallic paint instead of non-metallic metal because the armor is metallic paint. Now here we ran into some trouble. Two things I should note here. First is that the pearl white paint from Reaper turns out, like other metallics, it doesn't cover very well. I had this theory that I base coated the armor in a light gray, or rather a medium gray, and then I would leave that in the recesses and just paint the pearl white on to create the highlights. Unfortunately, that took a ton of coats, and I don't know if you can tell, but when I look very closely at this, I can see that the paint is caked on a little bit thick. What I should have done was lay down a base coat of just normal paint, I mean an undercoat of white to gray with the highlights already painted and just a normal white paint, and then add the pearl white on top of that just for the sheen. And that would have probably been a better effect. But you live and you learn. The other issue I had with this was not the paint and not the instructions from the painters, but the actual casting of the model. See, on the DVD set, when they're painting his armor, it's zoomed in very closely. You can see how they're painting the lion figure on his chest, and the head is very, very finely sculpted. You can see every strand of hair in the mane. On the copy of the model that I have, the head is just an indistinct blur. There is no way to pick anything out on that. So what I have here is a casting of the miniature from a slightly old and worn out mold, which is unfortunate. But again, that's on the Miniatures Company, that's on Dark Sword, not on Jen or Anne. But, you know, in hindsight, I should probably have painted the lion a different color to contrast, like maybe make that gold. But oh well, as a learning experiment, trial and error. It's okay. Oh, would you look at that? The sun passed behind a cloud, or rather a cloud passed in front of the sun. So now we don't have that glaring light anymore. Maybe it's a bit dark instead, but oh well. I think this is more of an even lighting. I'm too lazy to go back and reshoot that first clip though. Haha. Anyway, this is the other stuff I got finished this week. So grand total of 4 models, but 2 of them were really big. These are my hill giants, and they are very darkly complex and well, I don't know what to say about them. I mean, it's Reaper bones, which means that, as I have complained often, some small fine details are not present, but on the other hand, these guys are so big that they don't have small details, they just have big details. And yeah. The most time-consuming thing was actually painting the skin, and when you have musculature like this, which is, it's such a big part of the mini, it's very visible, and it's very, very outsized, outlandishly exaggerated. How do you paint that? Do you follow the exaggeration with a paint, or do you try to smooth it out? Well, I try to have quite a large contrast between the shade and the highlights to make the muscles stand out clearly, but still make it look not completely unnatural. I mean, look at it. It should look at least sort of like. I mean, it's a cartoony effect, but hopefully it doesn't take you out of. It doesn't jar you and make you go, "Oh, that could never look like that." And you know, I'm pretty pleased with them. And I went with some sparse bases. These bases are mostly like a rocky ground, but I added little tufts of grass growing in the cracks of some parts of the rock, just to break up the monotony of it, not just have a plain gray base. And so yeah, that's them. Let's see what's in the works. And work continues on all the other Darksword minis. They've all had a little bit more paint on them since last time you saw, I think. Yeah, I mean, I'll probably finish a couple more by next week. Not much to say yet, really. More interesting, perhaps, would be to look at these frost giants who, well, they probably look really messy right now, which is because I've started out by doing all the stuff that needs dry brushing, which turns out to be quite a lot on these guys. They have big fur capes, lots of other fur portions, they've got skulls and stuff. Not much metal, though. Well, unless you paint the weapons metal, but I'm painting these as some sort of ice weapons. They're not quite done yet. I'd say these guys are overall about 50% complete right now. It's mostly a question of finishing the skin and the various bits of clothing that are not dry brushed, and that'll tie everything together. This is also a lesson in, well, this was a practice for me in using the airbrush. I experimented, I had this idea. You remember last week I showed you that I had primed them already pre-shaded. So I got this idea, if I spray a very thin glaze of blue on top of that, that might give me my skin color without me needing to do anything else. If the primer, if the pre-shading shows through, if it's just a thin glaze. But unfortunately, as you can see, I wound up with a very solid dark blue overall. It's only showing still on the skin because I've painted over it everywhere else. And this is too dark and not differentiated enough. I don't know if it was the mix of paint to thinner that was wrong, or if I simply sprayed on too heavy a coat, or both. More practice is clearly required. More learning can be done, but you live and you learn. That's how it goes. I'll make sure to finish them up by next week, in any case. Here we see the fire giants in the works, assembled and gap filled a little bit, like for example here, where the one portion of the cape meets the other, and I've put down some basing material, just very rough texture. Like I said, there's 4 of these, and I think I'll actually be priming these just black, because fire giants are very dark in coloration. They're supposed to have like coal black skin, dark iron weapons and armor, you know, dark colors overall. So I think I'll just go with plain black for that layer. Some of these sculpts are a little odd. Why does this guy have 2 morning stars dangling from his belt? It looks extremely unpractical. He's going to trip over these things, or they're going to hit him in the shins. So, not sure what that's about. These make a little more sense. I mean, these don't look as heavy, these chains. But who knows? Style over substance, I suppose. And here we have the fire giant princess or queen or whatever she is. Straightening the spear out was something I had to do. Oh, and this sword needs to straighten out. And as so often when something is bent one way and I straighten it out in bones, it gets a little bend the opposite way. It was bent like this, very curved. So I straighten it out, and now it's a little bit too much the other direction, but unless you're looking at it from this exact angle, I don't think you'll notice. The others were okay. No real issues. I considered briefly not adding this cape before painting, but no, I think I can get into that gap there. It's all going to be really dark in there, you know. I might just keep it plain black, not do anything at all to it, honestly. Just as a shade. What do we have left? In Bones Giants, we only have 2 left. The Cloud Giant and the Storm Giant. The Storm Giant is, of course, the poster boy for Bones. And because I've already painted... I painted one of these models before for some reason, but I'll come up with a different color scheme this time. What else has happened here on the workbench? Well, I've added something to my airbrush. This little contraption here, which now sits between the air hose and the airbrush, came with a compressor. It's simply listed on the box as, let's see what it's called. It's called a pistol grip filter. And I didn't attach it at first because I thought, well, this, to me, a pistol grip means that an airbrush has a trigger here instead of on top. And this one doesn't, so it's not a pistol grip. But apparently, pistol grip just means anything that is fed from below. In which case, are there any airbrushes that are not pistol grip? Huh, I don't know. But anyway, I added it after I happened to look at some videos on YouTube by other people who have the same compressor as I do now, and they had all attached this thing. So I suppose it serves some purpose. I think it might be a moisture trap, but I'm not sure. If anybody knows, you know, give me a comment about it. Yeah, so I think that's it. That's enough projects to be working on for the moment. I think I don't need to add anything else right now. Addendum. I already figured out that that filter, I had to take it off because it doesn't work at all with this airbrush. See, I tried using it with that filter attached, and it seemed like the airbrush had broken. It didn't do anything at all. I couldn't push down on the I pushed down on this trigger, and it didn't, there was no resistance. And the reason for that is that what happens mechanically when I push this thing down is that there is a pin in here that pushes down into this connection on the air hose, and it opens up. I had previously thought that there was some sort of valve in here that it opened up, but it doesn't. It opens up air to let it flow through the hose and into the airbrush. So yeah, it doesn't work with this model of airbrush. Anyway, I did some more experimenting. I have now actually primed these guys in black, and as you can see, they've got some silver on them. They've got some metallic. And I actually shot that through the airbrush. And that taught me some more things about it. Namely, I was not using airbrush paint, I was using just ordinary game color chainmail silver, and I was thinning it in the cup directly. That caused some issues because this is an old bottle of paint, and when I poured some paint in there were a few clumps, and they got stuck and stopped the airflow. So yeah, I fixed that eventually, but another lesson learned. I also started to wonder if maybe I was talking previously about how the meter for the pressure went much higher than it says on the box. But I'm starting to wonder if when people talk about spraying at a certain PSI, do they mean with a trigger up or down? Because what I discovered was if I turn the air pressure all the way up, the knob on this all the way up, and then I depress the trigger to let the air flow through the brush, then the maximum pressure I can get is barely 20 psi, which is what the specs say. So maybe that's what it means. Does anybody know? Please clue me in. Anyway, I've gotten a head start on these guys. Now I have to black out the areas that aren't supposed to be metal again, but that's simple enough. I am rather pleased with the finish I get with doing the metallics through the airbrush instead of by brush. It's very even and nice, which is nice. No brush strokes. Anyway, addendum ends. New stuff I can show you this week is another Kickstarter from Midland Miniatures. They always deliver very rapidly on their Kickstarters. I appreciate that. That's one of the reasons I like them. The other reason, of course, is that they produce very nice looking sculpts. This one was for a group of halfling adventurers, and they come in two versions: standing up and sleeping or dead, lying on the ground. And as an add-on, I got some of their older halfling villagers. So now I have a ton of halflings. I'm gonna have to run a D&D campaign centered all where everybody plays in halfling pretty soon. Get some use out of these. But that was it for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Click like, subscribe, comments, and I will see you next week. Until then, I'm Dakian, and I'm signing off.